What's up, geniuses? Welcome to For the Record. I'm your host, Rob Markman. Now, as y'all know, we normally focus on the biggest releases in music and have the conversations with the biggest artists. But today, there's going to be a little bit of a shift. There's an important shift, all right? The 2020 election is upon us, so we partner with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and we want to discuss what's at stake in this year's election. We're going to break down all of the important issues for you, how you can get involved, and what are some of the biggest figures in hip hop saying, all right? There's a lot of information out there. We just want to sort it out for you and talk through this thing, all right? So first up, we have Janai Nelson. She's the Associate Director-Counsel of the NAACP LDF. She was also the lead counsel on Veazey versus Abbott, a federal challenge to Texas voter ID law. Janai, welcome to For the Record.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We appreciate all the work that you've been putting into for us. I mean, there's heroes that we see, and then there's heroes that are really fighting for us, and it's important to celebrate our heroes across the board. You are definitely one of those heroes, so thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, and next up, we absolutely have a hero, Port Arthur, legend, Texas legend. You know what I'm saying? His influence stretches all across the globe, right? He's had an illustrious career as a solo rapper, but he got his start in the duo, the legendary duo, UGK. Rest in peace to Pimp C. You know, he's also been very outspoken about racial justice, and he's using his voice and his platform to educate people, to fight. He was out in Minnesota after George Floyd was murdered at the hands of police, and just really using his platform in a very powerful way. Bun B, welcome to For the Record, my brother.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me, man.
Nah, man. Thank you, man. And thank you for the example that you set for us as well. I think we've seen your career on many levels, from the street side, coming up and very relatable with UGK, and we've seen you grow as a man and a businessman, somebody in the community using their voice. We've seen you grow as a father and a husband and a grandfather, and it's been very inspiring to see, and lets us know that our dreams and our view doesn't have to be so narrow than just the block that we grew up on, that we can grow. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, man. Appreciate it.
I want to start with Janai. You ladies first, you know.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your role at the NAACP LDF and what the organization does? I just want to kind of educate people on what we got going on here today.
Sure. So I'm the Associate Director-Counsel, which means that I work with the President and Director-Counsel, Sherilyn Eiffel. We oversee all of the programmatic work of the Legal Defense Fund. We oversee all of the operations. And the Legal Defense Fund was founded in 1940. So if you do the math, you know we turned 80 years old this year, which is a really important milestone for us that we're very proud of. And we've been known to be the lawyers for the civil rights movement. And as you know, the civil rights movement never ended. So we have been working hand in hand with grassroots organizations and, of course, primarily bringing our own lawsuits and litigation and engaging in policy work and organizing and everything else you can imagine in terms of bringing an arsenal of tools to try to advance racial justice in this country.
No, and the work you do, again, is so important and so amazing and crucial to just bettering society, you know what I mean, and moving us forward as a people. Can you talk to us? 2020 has been a doozy. Like this has been a year, you know, at least in our generation, like no other. Can you kind of talk and just give us a broad view, and we'll get into the issues, but what's at stake in the 2020 election? You know, what issues specifically can voters impact on the ballot this year?
There are so many. Of course, you know, we're all focused on the presidential election for very obvious reasons. And the Legal Defense Fund is a nonpartisan organization, so we do not endorse particular candidates. But we obviously are committed to ensuring that everyone has a right to participate in this all-important election. But it's not just the presidential election that's critical this year. There are national elections for senators in different states. There are, in fact, 470 seats in Congress that are up for election this year. The entire House of Representatives, that's 435 seats. And then you have another 35 Senate seats that are open this year for election. You have countless state office elections. You have about 11 governors that are up for election. You have attorney generals that are up for election. You if you want to drill down to local elections, you have mayors in critical cities that are up for election, including school boards and city councils. And if you want to think about even more local than that, there are 2,300 sheriffs and prosecutors that are on the ballot this election cycle. So there's a little something for everybody. If you want to have an impact locally, or if you want to have an impact nationally, this is the election for you. There is something on the ballot for everyone to get into and to pay attention to.
You just kind of open up my mind, and I hope everybody who's watching that their mind opens up about, because I think for young people especially, it can be daunting that people maybe feel like, especially if something as big as a presidential election, like, well, I'm just one person and my vote doesn't count. And a lot of people talk themselves out of it, right? When you're talking about all that's on the line, I heard you say attorney generals. So many attorney general positions are open in 2020. One recent case we saw was the unfortunate horror that we saw with Breonna Taylor and the fallout from that. And a lot of people are looking at the attorney general over there in her state and looking for accountability with that position specifically. So if you're upset and if you're mad about Breonna Taylor, you should also get out there and vote, because you can affect who the attorney general is, who is making these decisions, bringing these cases to the grand jury.
That's exactly right. There are 10 attorney general seats on the ballot this election, and attorney generals wield a lot of power. They help determine whether charges will be brought, as we saw in the Breonna Taylor case. They help determine what information is going to get to a grand jury, whether they're going to bring facts to the grand jury where they could potentially indict a police officer or not. There's a lot of power in those positions, but there's also a lot of power in the vote that we have to elect those people to those positions. So we can't forget about the power that we have to affect change. And that is something that we all share. We all have the same currency. We all have a vote, and we can all cast it in favor of the communities that we live in.
Bun, I want to ask you, man, because you're somebody that I think we could all relate to. We could see a little bit of ourselves in Bun B at one point in your life or another. So what are the issues that are most important to you? Like, what are you fighting for this election? What are the things that really grabs your attention and your focus?
Well, I think it starts with just the ability to vote itself, right? Like being from the South, voter suppression campaigns have been prevalent where I'm from for decades, more than 100 plus years. They have fought to suppress not only the vote itself, but the ability for people of color coming from certain communities to actually use their vote. So I think that's the first thing. I mean, we should be happy that we are legally even afforded the right to vote. But like, for example, I'm in Texas. I live in the largest county in Texas, Harris County. And this is a place that normally has 12 ballot boxes for people to drop off mail-in balloting and mail-in voting. There's only one now for 4 million people, which is the same number of boxes that they have in the smallest county in the state of Texas, which only has 391 voters. So this is just one of the ways that the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has used to try to suppress the vote for people of color, not just Black people, Mexican people, immigrants, and so forth and so on. So just that alone, right? Just fighting to make sure that you have the ability to vote safely, especially during a pandemic, right? Having different opportunities and available for people to actually vote, for people that don't feel safe going to a polling station, right? The ability to drop off ballots, to mail in their ballots. Obviously, we see everything happening with the post office in America. So that's just one of them. Obviously, coming from a community largely populated by people of color, police engagement and police brutality has been a big issue for many years. We've been screaming about the way that the police us in our communities, the way they engage with us, the way that escalation occurs with us, implicit biases for the police as well, not to mention transparency and accountability for police who commit crimes against the citizens of the community that they're paid to patrol by the people of that community. I mean, there's so many different things that we could be concentrating on. Those are the two, I think, that we see the most attention being brought to right now. And it's important for us to be involved because we have this very large base that's available to be the tipping point in these elections, but we don't engage, we don't register, we don't vote. But we're the ones that tend to feel the majority of the repercussions behind administrations in power that don't really share our concerns. And so because of the fact that I'm from these communities, from, that type of community of color in this country, and because I have a level of trust afforded to me based off my prior career as a recording artist, I've always used my platform to lead people in the right direction, to make sure that people are educated about what the concerns of their community are, how to deal with those concerns. And so I'm just trying to, be on the right side of history right now. I have children, I have grandchildren right now. I'm a grandparent myself. And I want to make sure that when I'm gone, that the world is better preparing them to be able to assimilate into this country and to be able to be afforded opportunities fairly. So I don't want my grandchildren, in the same way that my grandparents didn't want me to have to fight for my basic civil rights, I don't want my grandchildren to have to fight for theirs, right? This should be the last time in this country that we take a stand to make sure that everyone has a fair chance to progress in this country.
Bun, if I may, man, because you brought up a very interesting point to me. Actually, when I called you to ask you to appear on the show, we got into a bit of a conversation about where we are and our kids and the examples that we're setting for our young folks. And you had drawn a parallel. You said this is our generation's, in your eyes, and I agree with you, our 1968. And if you don't take action in 2020, what are you going to tell your kids, that you just stood on the sideline, that you didn't step up to the fight? This fight that you're talking about. And Janai, you talked about early on the NAACP LDF going back since the civil rights era, because has that really ever ended? You made the point that the fight never really ended. What's the correlations do you see between 1968 and 2020, if any? Because you may not agree. I don't want to put all that on you.
I do agree. We have been fighting against police brutality since police departments and sheriffs and white citizen patrols and slave patrols, which were the genesis of the current police system that we have been in existence. So this is nothing new. They have never treated us fairly. It has never been a system that was meant to work for us. And what we have been doing since the 60s is organizing and protesting and rallying to get America to finally pay attention to what has largely been behind, it done in the dark, behind closed doors, what people could not see. And, I think Will Smith is the one who said is nothing has changed. It's just that we now are able to record it and see it. And that has done something, I think, quite profound. That has really made it impossible for people to ignore the reality that Black and Latinx people have been experiencing their entire lives. And it's something that we now have to face and confront. And so I see a direct parallel between those fights and uprisings and experiences of people who have reached their limit of patience and reached their limits of passivity and are saying, if the courts don't give us justice, if the processes that exist don't give us justice, we will take to the streets and we will demand it. And that's often very important. The Legal Defense Fund operates within the judicial system, but it's always helpful to have additional pressure to make the system work in the way that it should. So I see a direct continuum. What I think is really disappointing, though, is that in this particular moment, we're not fighting to advance only. We are doing some of that, but in many ways, we're just fighting to hold ground. We're fighting so that we don't have the protections that we have already established roll back. So it's a both end, right? We're fighting to make sure that we don't go backwards and that we can win and move forward. And we could do something that's even more transformative than the situation that we are presently in and are coming out of.
Bun, I want to throw this question to you and Janai to get your take on this as well. But this year, we've seen hip hop artists be really, really vocal. Like they haven't been in a long time. I remember growing up on Public Enemy and the platform that they ran on, entertainment, of course, and KRS-One, but there was always messages in the music. And we're starting to see more of that in 2020. Little Baby dropped a song called The Bigger Picture following the murder of George Floyd. And the music is about police brutality and racism, but Baby also talks about the stakes in the election and his role in it, right? He says, I can't lie, like I don't rap about killing and dope, but I'm telling my youngins to vote, which was a little unexpected. I don't know if we expected that from Baby based off of what we've seen, but he really stepped up. Bun, what do you think about the way that hip hop artists who aren't typically known for speaking out on politics and how they've gotten engaged this year?
Well, I think it speaks to the level of awareness that our young people have right now. They're watching the same things that we are. A lot of this conversation is happening on social media platforms where these artists really connect with their fan base and have a very strong following on. And I don't think they can look at what we're looking at and just be silent. We tend to discount our young people substantially. We don't give them credit for caring enough or for being about change enough. And they've proven us wrong this year, as they consistently do. If you look at the civil rights fight throughout time, young people are always on the forefront because they inherit this world. And so they're not happy with the direction this world is going into. The divisiveness, the racism, the homophobia, the xenophobia, the sexism, all of these different things they're not cool to young people. Young people party together with people from all different walks of life, different colors, different creeds, different identities. And they don't like being told that they can't do that or that they shouldn't do that. They see police brutality happening. They're not cool with that. They want to let the world know that they're not cool with that, especially the people that they speak to. Because people like Lil Baby have a very diverse fan base, right? They have fans that identify with them based on the environment that they grew up in and the communities that they speak about. And then you have their other fan base who is infatuated about the coolness factor and they like the quality of the music and they want to be a part of what's happening. And so because of the fact that they know they speak to these people, they want to make sure that they're sending the right message right now. They want to be able, like I do, to look back and say that in 2020, at least they tried. At least they said something, because Lil Baby has kids. He doesn't want his kids to have to deal with that type of madness. In the same way that I don't want my kids or grandkids to deal with that. But hip hop has always been the sounding board for the different issues of our communities, basically the inner cities of America. And we've always had young people engage in that space. But a lot of them were a lot more predictable. A lot of them come from what we refer to as the conscious group of MCs, right? Who speak to that on a consistent basis. But it's these younger artists that deal with the ramifications of police brutality, of systemic racism in their communities that are stepping forward and stepping up and saying, hey, man, this was bad when I got here. When I grew up, it's bad now. And I don't want the kids that come after me to have to deal with this. So it's time for us who are able to do something right now to stand up, to be heard, and exercise our rights. And they're trying to tell people to go to the polls, to get engaged, to get educated, learn about the people in your communities, in your district, in your city, on your city council, whoever your mayor or district attorney is, that are not looking at the concerns of people in these communities and taking action. So if your city council people who represent your district don't care about your district and don't speak to the concerns of your district, vote them out. Same thing for the district attorney. If they're prosecuting people of color at a greater numbers for no better reason than because they're of color, vote them out. If you don't have a mayor that's aware of what's happening in their city in terms of their police department and doesn't put a police chief in power that holds his officers accountable, vote him out. You have the power to do that. You have the power to put people in office who will listen to and in certain circumstances share the concerns of the community that you live in on a day-to-day basis and are willing to do something about it. And so I applaud the young people who are not afraid to use their voice, to use their platform, and to use their voice to speak up for the people of the communities that they represent, that they come from, that they make money from, who have their trust. And I mean, they're not going back. There's a lot of them who are not doing it just now for the clout, right? They're serious about being involved in this. They're serious about change, and they're not going back. And they're making sure that the people that listen to them and follow them won't go back either.
Janai, what do you think about the youth and hip hop in particular, but the way that you've seen them, the hip hop artists, but in the youth in particular, also get involved this year? Tyler, the creator, posted a video, and we've never really seen Tyler speak on political issues, though we've seen him grow as a young man from where he was with Odd Future to where he is now. And it's been amazing to see. But he posted a video encouraging his followers to vote, and he added that he will actually be voting for the first time. Um, what do you think about this? Just seeing young people get involved in this way.
It's incredibly encouraging, and I just want to co-sign everything that Bun B said, because it is this generation that is going to inherit this country, this democracy, however we leave it, whatever shape we leave it in. People of color, children of color, as of this year, as of 2020, this year has brought all sorts of calamities. But one wonderful development that the Census Bureau has projected is that this is the first year that children of color, the 74 million children in this country, are a majority people of color. So we have a vested interest in shaping this country and this future to make it something that actually works for us. Demography is not destiny. Our numbers are not automatically going to give us power, or not going to automatically translate into equality and access and all the things that we deserve. We've got to make that happen. So we have to exercise our right to vote. And I'm incredibly encouraged to hear artists, and as Bun has said, not necessarily ones that you would predict, even though their message is valuable. And I hope people continue to speak in that voice. But these unexpected voices, or people who are speaking to a different audience and a different, set of followers who, that message will resonate with them in a very particular way. And people are embracing the idea that they're voting for the first time, or that they're going to be a poll worker, or that they're bringing a bunch of friends with them to the polls. And that's the kind of energy that we need. And I have to say, I think we all understand what this particular election means and how almost existential it is for all of us. And this, if we don't wake up now, if we don't think now is the time to exercise our right to vote, I don't know what more we need as a wake-up call. So I'm really hoping that this energizes everybody, and I'm thrilled to see so many voices encouraging young people to come out to the polls.
Janai, just as important as it is for us to get to the polls and vote, right? We also need poll workers, and those workers come from the community to make it easier for everybody else. There's a lot of people who will be interested in filling those roles and helping their community, but might not know how. Can you tell us some resources, some websites they can visit so people can know how to sign up to be a poll worker?
Absolutely. We are so excited to be in partnership with More Than a Vote on a poll worker recruitment campaign. And that campaign could not come at a more important time, because we are in a pandemic, and we know that many of the people who have powered our polls for decades are elderly and are people who have pre-existing conditions and who are the most vulnerable in this pandemic. So we are looking to allow them to sit back and cast their ballot in peace, and to have those of us who are able-bodied, who are ready and willing to serve in that capacity, to do it. You can get paid to do it, which is a really wonderful thing. So you can go to voting.naacpldf.org and get all sorts of information about voting, about the census, about everything voting. Or you can go directly to powerthepolls.org. Either one of those sites will allow you to sign up as a poll worker, and the voting site will give you even more information about ways that you can not only become a poll worker, but also know the rules of voting in your particular jurisdiction. But we are encouraging everybody who has the capability to do that work on election day, because it's time that we have a new generation of poll workers really own and reclaim this democracy for their own.
Janai, I was wondering if you could help me clear up a misconception, or just so we can get to the truth here, with your legal expertise and experience. In June, Snoop Dogg did an interview and said he's never voted before, but he's going to be casting a ballot this year. He said he thought he couldn't vote due to his criminal record. And since his record has been expunged, he now actually has the ability. There's been a long-standing belief that individuals with felony convictions cannot vote. I have a brother who served time, and even within my own family, it's like, well, what is his actual rights? What is the truth here? How does it vary from state to state? And why do you believe there's so much confusion around this issue?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion, and I wish I could walk you through it state to state, but that would probably eat up all our time. But what's most important is for people to know that it is a state issue, right? So you need to look up the rules in your state. We do know that in most states, except for two, except for Maine and Vermont, if you are incarcerated, so if you are behind bars, you're not allowed to vote. That's something that, that was one of my very first cases litigating back, over 20 years ago to try to fight against that law here in New York, where I'm from. And the laws vary around the country, but they are increasingly more generous and allow people who have completed their parole or completed, any state of probation to vote. That's usually in most states, you have the ability to do that once you've fully completed your sentence. There are some states that allow you to vote even sooner than that. And then sadly, there are some states that are fighting like mad to keep people from the polls, like Florida, which requires you not just to pay all your actual sentence in terms of the time that you spend and the oversight that you receive, but as you may already know, there's an active lawsuit going on about whether people with felony convictions also need to pay fines and fees. And we are actually, the Legal Defense Fund is one of many groups fighting against that change from the legislature to force people to pay fines and fees because it's effectively a poll tax. We're asking people to pay money to have to restore their right to vote, and that's fundamentally unconstitutional.
Right, and that, amongst other suppression tactics, that's like a clear wealth-based hurdle that's placed in front. Bun,
Well, can I give one website that people might look at? So if you go to canivote.org, CANIVOTE.org, you can find out information on how to register to vote. You can find out what your voting status is. If you are already registered, you can make sure that your registration is up to date. And that's critically important. You don't want to show up on election day at the polling site and find out that for some reason your registration is lapsed. You can find out what the rules for registering are in your state. What does it mean to be an eligible voter? And through that process, you can learn what is required if you have a felony conviction, if you have to have completed your probation, if you have to have completed your parole, or any other particular requirement for registering to vote and participating in this upcoming election. So canivote.org is an excellent source of information, and it's powered by secretaries of state. So it's something that each state has funneled their information into. So it should be up to date and accurate and reliable.
Thank you for that site. Like, it's so simple. Like, but I never heard of that site before. Like, it's a tremendous resource, right? Bun, what do you hear from people on the ground? And you're out there in the communities, you're out in the protests, you're speaking to young people all the time. What are some of the other, aside from having a felony and not being able to vote, which is a misconception that people not fully understanding, do you see other efforts used to disenfranchise Black and brown voters?
Oh, absolutely. And to expound on that in terms of felons or people who have done jail times, we have an organization here called Project Orange, which actually goes into the county jail and lets people know that if you're in county jail, but you're still on pretrial and you haven't been convicted of anything yet, you can actually still vote in the state of Texas. So we give them information on how to request a ballot, how to fill it out, and how to get it in so that they can be counted on pretrial. But when I talk to people in the street, the average person on the street about this, whether it's at the barber shop or at the sneaker store or somewhere else, the main concern that I hear from people is that they don't know who to trust. They keep hearing different things from this side, they hear things from the other side, and there's so much misinformation and disinformation being shared through social media, which is where a lot of young people get their information, their news, and their engagement about what's going on in the world they live in from. They don't know who to trust. They don't know which way to go. And so they're like, man, I'm not going to vote because I don't know who to trust. I don't know if CNN is telling the truth. I don't know if Fox is telling the truth. I don't know if Pelosi is telling the truth or if Trump is telling the truth. I don't know who to believe. So I just don't want to get involved. And that's a concerted effort, right? To confuse people, to give them misinformation and disinformation so that their vision is clouding and they're not really sure which way to go. And so I tell people all the time, look, get off the apps, get off Facebook, get off Instagram and Twitter, and go and do your own research. You know what I'm saying? Look into these issues and start on a local level. Because when you get to a national level, that stuff can be very confusing. Start on a local level. Start on, the streets of your community or where your mother or your grandmother lives. If there's potholes there, if 911 doesn't respond quick enough, if there isn't enough police patrol in those communities, find out who's responsible for that district and that community. See if there's someone who's actively involved in issues in a community, if they really have any point of reference for the community that they have power over. And if they don't, vote someone in power who does. And you can start on a local level and work your way up to these national issues. But you have to find a point of engagement that works for you, right? You have to find issues that concern you. A lot of my friends are parents. So we talk about education, right? We talk about the books that their children are educated with. We talk about the issues concerning young people of color in this country and really about what happens when our children have interactions with the police, because we have police in our high schools, in our middle schools. It's not even before they start driving. They're possibly going to become victim of a police interaction that goes the wrong way. We have to have conversations with our children of color that other people don't necessarily have to have, right? So just start with issues and points of concern that matter to you, you know? And then once you have something that you're concerned about, find the people who are speaking about those issues in a way that you find comfort with, in a way that you agree with, and put your power behind them. I know a lot of people who are not happy with the candidates that we have available to us for president. What can we do about that? We start on a local level. We elect city council people that become state reps, that become state senators, that become mayors, national senators, governors, and eventually a candidate to run for the presidency of the United States of America. But if you want to see better people in line for those positions, you have to elect people and put them in line for those positions.
That's great advice. That is great advice. One issue that is surely super important in 2020 and unique to 2020 and affects this election in so many ways is the coronavirus pandemic. First of all, it's a healthcare issue, which is at stake, right, on the ballots. And we know that it disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities. Even some people, Bun, within our music industry, right? Like our musical family, like to see that Scarface had coronavirus and the health complications he's facing, or DJ Jazzy Jeff, YNW Melly contracted COVID, Fred the Godson, somebody I know that you know, who I know who was dear to me, even died from the complications of the virus. And these are just the people notable that we know, our
Right.
grandmothers, our uncles, our aunts, brothers and sisters. How could the election impact the national coronavirus response, Janai?
Yeah, so you raised some very sobering facts. Black and Latinx people are 3 times as likely to get the coronavirus because of existing health disparities, because of lack of access to health care, because of so many other factors like systemic racism and just historical inequalities. And we're then 2 times as likely to die from it. So it really is something that's quite close to home for us. And of course, if you think about voting, which is a big civic event, it's something that draws a lot of people out. Sometimes you have to wait on long lines. Sometimes you have to be in enclosed spaces. That poses another potential threat to our community. But it's not one that we can't navigate. It's not one that we can't be prepared for. We've always advocated that you should not have to choose between the fundamental right to vote and your health and your safety. That those two should not be in tension. Of course, what we're seeing is a lot of tactics throughout the country to make that tension particularly acute for Black and Latinx people. We've undertaken several lawsuits to push back against that and to try to lessen some of the barriers, like witness requirements in certain states, or trying to bring access to mail-in voting. If you're someone who absolutely cannot get to the polls, then you should definitely ask for a mail-in ballot as soon as possible. The deadlines are closing in so many states right now. So get your mail-in ballot. Don't believe the hype that it's, not going to be counted or that it's, subject to any fraud. As long as you follow the instructions carefully and appropriately on how to fill in that ballot and you send it in, there's no reason that it should not be counted. But send it in early. Right? We've heard about delays from the post office. We've heard about a whole lot of things happening that have slowed this process down. So the biggest advice I can give is to vote early. Get your mail-in ballot early and send it in. But of course, if you're able to go to a polling site, go participate in early voting. We saw so many people out yesterday in the first day of early voting in Georgia. People who waited online, who, came in groups and caravans and carpooled and did their thing. And that's the type of engagement that really we need to see throughout the country. But do that during early voting. So maybe on election day, it's not going to be as crowded. It's not going to be as tense. And those are some ways that we can each participate and try to take some of the pressure off the system on election day. But be prepared with your PPE. And we've sent out over 2 million packages to voters in the South in particular to make sure that they had gloves, that they have masks, that they have wipes, everything that they need. So we have no excuses. We can do this and we can get out.
That's amazing work. Bun, you voted early, right?
Yeah, I just voted today. I was running late to get on this call today. I didn't want to be a hypocrite about telling people to go to the polls and telling them to go vote early when today's the first day of voting early in my city, and I didn't take advantage of that.
No, that was great. Thank you for that, and you were actually right on time. Like you weren't late at all. But if you were late, that's an excellent reason to be late for this.
The only
this is a
reason.
Pre-tape. Yeah, this is a pre-tape. We'll work it out. Voting is way more important. I appreciate that. And what was your experience like?
For me, it was fairly smooth. My wife and I looked around the city to see exactly where the locations were that were available for early voting. Our county clerk in Harris County, Chris Hollins, has done an amazing job of making availability to the citizens of Harris County as easy and effortless as possible while still addressing safety concerns. So we have in-person, we have early voting availability. We have drive-in here. There's actually going to be a day in the month of October where polls will be open for 24 hours. There will be at least one location in the city that'll be open for 24 hours. And that's for people who don't work 9 to 5. Everybody's, work doesn't fit nice and tightly into that window. So we're doing everything we can here in Houston and Harris County to, offset the oppression tactics being implemented by our governor. We want to make sure that everyone in this city has the ability to vote as early as possible, that they don't have to wait until election day, that there are many polling places open and available to them, but also giving them options, right? And helping them to exercise those options as early as possible. We don't want our elderly who are more susceptible to contracting COVID to have to be in these tight quarters if they don't have to be. We want young people to be able to engage in whatever way is comfortable for them. If they don't feel like standing in a line physically, they can get in the line with a car. They can still listen to their new music. You know what I'm saying? They can still jam Big Sean's new album or Conway's album or get ready for Benny's album this week. All these great...
That's what you was listening to, Bun, when you was getting your early vote
on? They're listening to that timeless with Benny, Wayne, and Sean right now. But, we want to make it as comfortable for people as possible, right? Because that's a big deterrent for people is accessibility and availability to the polls. Some people are actually still in school right now. Some people are at work. So we want to take all of these different groups of people's concerns into consideration to make sure that if you operate under these circumstances, voting's available for you. If you work under these set of circumstances, voting's available to you. And even for those who, so we only have one place to drop off your mail-in ballots in the city of Houston, right? I'm, as a member of More Than a Vote, which is the voting initiative brought together by LeBron James, we have partnered with Lyft in Harris County. So for those who might have trouble getting to that ballot box, Lyft and More Than a Vote are allowing people to take free rides through Lyft to get there and drop their ballots off. So there's a lot of different initiatives taking place right now to try to put the citizens of Harris County and the city of Houston in the best position possible to make voting as easy for them as possible.
It sounds like in a lot of ways it's a case of good planning, that there are resources out there available for you, and it's finding what those resources are, planning early, figuring out how you're going to get to the polls, and if you can't get to the polls, how you're going to utilize these other methods to make your vote count.
Absolutely. And I put it on my page earlier. If you live in Harris County in the city of Houston, you can go to harrisvotes.com. It'll let you know where all the polling sites are, which one will be available for 24-hour voting, which ones will be drive-through, which ones are available for early voting, so that if you are trying to vote, you don't have as much opposition and you don't have any excuses. You can go out and get involved.
And I love to see young people getting it together, but also we put a lot of effort into planning how we're going to get the new Jordans or the Dunks. We know what Foot Locker to go to, what time they open, what time you got to get online to get there, and stuff like that.
And
so
we're willing to stand in line for hours for that.
Right.
So, for Supreme, all of that. Yeah. Eric Emanuel shorts, all of this stuff that all the kids want that's fresh right now. Willing to stand in line for hours for that. Stand in line for hours for something that really makes a difference in your life. Not saying that being fresh isn't important, but it's not as important as being oppressed in this country.
No, absolutely. Before we start to wind down, I just want to touch on a couple of things real quick. And we touched on it earlier, but I feel like it's such an important, when we talked about 2020 is just a year like no other. The police brutality, and more so than brutality, because I always say if it was police brutality simply, it would happen across the board, and that would be a problem. Racism as well. You know what I'm saying? It's not just the brutality alone. I feel like racism is at the root of this. And it feels like young people especially got out and we protested this year in droves despite everything. This is something that people were going to fight, and young people are going to fight. And they have shown us in 2020 that it's worth the fight, and they're not going to let up the fight. Just, Janai, if you could talk about, again, the intersection of why this election is so important for this issue of police brutality and systemic racism. And you talked earlier about the through line that you can draw from what the policing was to how they policed runaway slaves back in the day. And the DNA is all in the DNA.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, folks who are talking about defunding the police or reimagining public safety, it's going to be a very difficult battle if we don't have more people who have access to the levers of power, who have the same mindset, who understand that this system is not working, that it's broken, that it must be fixed, and are willing to engage with community members to find the right solutions, to figure out where we should be diverting resources. So, Bun talked about the fact that you have police officers in schools. You need to find out what your local elected official's stance is on policing in schools. You need to find out what your local election official's stance is on, a variety of issues, like restoring the vote to people with felony convictions, like equitable funding for schools, like, this citing particular environmental hazards in low-income communities of color. All of those issues that we see in our day-to-day lives that impact us, that we complain about and recognize are unfair, we can start to ask questions, and they should be part of this broader movement, this galvanization of people and interest and energy that started with the issue of police brutality, but certainly isn't ending there. We're now having a broader conversation about systemic racism writ large and what that means in almost every aspect of our society. So all of that is on the ballot this November. Our ability to actually, continue this movement and bring it to its full potential and see some real change. It's either going to be possible because we vote in the right people who have the same mindset, or who at least will not stand in opposition to that, or we are going to find ourselves in a very, very difficult place. And we already see what some of the indicators are. Right now, we are in the process of pushing back against an executive order that is actually making it harder for federal contractors and anyone really doing business with the government to talk about systemic racism, to talk about white privilege, to talk about the things that we know are facts, to talk about the history of slavery in this country. And if we're going in that direction where people are policing our thoughts, people are policing the very benign ways in which we're trying to educate one another in a workplace environment so that we don't face discrimination. If we are facing those types of battles before this election, I can only imagine what we will face after if we don't make the right choices at the ballot. So this is all on us. We have a lot of obstacles to contend with, but I have every faith in our communities to be able to do that and do more, to be able to turn out the vote and to be able to turn this country around. It's for our own futures that we have to do it. So I know that we have the power and the willpower to get it done.
No, I believe in that too. This feels like a year like no other. Again, the weight and the emotional labor that it took just to get through 2020 with everything that we faced as a people is hard. But when you go out there and you see with the vigor that people are fighting against systemic racism, oppression, these rollbacks that you're talking about, it's also very inspiring. And it really feels like we can affect change in a major way if we act. And so that's why this was an important discussion to have. Bun, any parting words, anything that you want to leave the people with, man?
I'm really, really excited that this generation is not sitting back aimlessly. We love to say that all this generation loves to do is play on their phones, play video games, and be disengaged. And you look at these rallies and these protests and these movements happening, and nothing can be further from the truth. As an OG, I always want to make sure that I'm on the front lines fighting for whatever it is that the generation behind me and the generation that is mine needs in order to progress safely. And so I'm happy to stand with these young people. I'm happy to stand with them in rallies. I'm happy to walk with them in marches. I'm happy to get the word out with them. And I mean, if you can look at this world right now and everything that's happening and be fine with that, you might be part of the problem. Like if you can't look at television and see the divisiveness in this country and see the oppression in this country, the voter suppression in this country, the way that people in communities of color are being brutalized by the police that are paid by those same people to police their communities, then you might be part of the problem. I'm not trying to be part of the problem. I'm trying to be part of the solution. It's not an easy solution. It's not an easy fight. But the fight before us was even harder. We get to go to these cities. You know, I go to Minneapolis and I get to march and protest against police brutality, against the way that escalations between people of color and the police get out of hand on a consistent basis. But then I still get to go to a nice hotel. You know, the people before me weren't even allowed to sleep in those cities when they walked and marched in those cities. The hotels weren't available to them. There's no way that Martin Luther King could have been at the Four Seasons with John Lewis in those days right now. So yes, we progress on some levels, but that's only for a very few of us. It's only for a privileged few of us who have these opportunities available to them, whether we be athletes, entertainers, people of influence, or those who live in a different tax bracket. We cannot turn our backs on the communities that we left and the people that stand behind us, waiting for us to help open the door for them, leave the windows cracked for them, stand in the gap for them. Not now, not ever. As an OG, it's my job to bite the bullet. So if there's any repercussions to be had for those of us on the front line, I want to make sure that I'm standing in front of the ones that can come behind me and finish the job. That's my duty. That's my honor. That's my privilege. And I'm glad that I'm of sound mind and body to be out here trying to make a change for my people.
But I'd like to thank our guest, Mr. Bun B, the OG. Long live the pimp.
Thank you, Rob, for having me, man.
No, thank you for answering the call every time, man. I'm super blessed to have you in my corner, man, for real. And Janai Nelson, thank you so much for joining us. It was so important. I think we could speak about these issues on a very level of how we feel and what we see with our eyes, but the expertise that you bring with the fight that you've been having in these courtrooms for us is so important. And I salute you for it. You're a real hero, and we're very lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much to the whole Genius team for putting this together. This was wonderful.
Get out there and vote, y'all. Come on. We could definitely make a change. And until next episode, peace.